all kinds of companies are now starting to use geospatial data that really hadn't thought about the applications in the past. But in transportation and logistics specifically, if you think about how challenging that industry is, I mean, just imagine a little package leaving your house and making it somewhere around the world on time. I still find amazing. I have a package that I ordered from China in February, and I think as it got to closer to St. Louis with COVID, it's lost. It's probably sitting on a platform somewhere in New York City, and I'll probably wind up getting that next year. But it was a little bitty package, and I think about how often little packages leave the entire planet and make it somewhere within a reasonable amount of time. So using geospatial data is critical as we move forward and as it becomes more sophisticated in improving delivery schedules, to track and expedite shipments, increasing the efficiency of inventory of goods by mapping the transit routes and warehouses. UPS only makes those left turns, in almost all the delivery companies, but really improving customer satisfaction and productivity, and thinking about the efficiency and effectiveness and overall cost structures in that entire process, because the margins can be very thin and the possibilities of error are very great. So I think this is a great time, especially with retail moving to an online environment, that geospatial become a part of the matrix of decision-making and data analytics. So with that, let's turn this over to the experts to give them a minute to introduce themselves. So first, Byron, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Bronwyn. And you're exactly right. Now is a very interesting time in the transportation space with the shift to e-commerce. So we've seen a lot of disruption from traditional models and people looking for some new answers. So I'm the CEO of Hum Industrial Technology. We design and deploy wireless sensors on freight rail cars. And so we provide some of that visibility and service reliability to make sure that package gets from point A to point B, or that that grain car or coal or whatever is shipped by rail. We try to help those folks be a more visible player in the supply chain.
That's fantastic. What a very complex system, but one that's so critical. Next, I would like for David James to introduce himself and give a little bit more detail about what you're doing at Esri.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. As Bronwyn said, I'm David James. I lead Esri's Airports GIS practice. Esri is one of those companies that is sort of like a best kept secret. It's a global market leader. We've been around since 1969. We have our technology deployed at more than 350,000 organizations, including some of the world's largest cities, national governments, 75% of the Fortune 500 companies, and more than 7,000 colleges and universities. So even though we're not that well known, we're not Microsoft, we're not Amazon, we're not Oracle, we're a huge company and a very large footprint in the sort of location-based solutions market. As far as airports go, I work both in the North American market, where we have 58 of the largest top 60 airports in the US using our technology. I also work internationally. Many of the large international airports like Schiphol in Amsterdam is a real showcase for us. And so I'm really excited to be able to share some of that information about how our technology is being used in transportation in this panel today. So thank you.
That's going to prove to be very exciting. And also Richard Updike, who is a portfolio manager for the United States Air Force Installation and Mission Support, Geospatial Information and Services role. That's a mouthful. Richard, can you tell us a little bit more about you? That is a lot. That's a fabulous title. I like that.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We got you now.
Well, thank you. Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to join this group. Yes, I'm in San Antonio, Texas with the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center. We are responsible for, as it says, installations and mission support. That involves civil engineering, built and natural infrastructure, environmental management. It includes airmen and family services. So any of your gymnasiums and dining halls on base, those sorts of facilities and activities, security forces, base defense, you name it. We have the full spectrum of responsibilities when it comes to installations, Air Force installations across the globe. And so, as you can imagine, geospatial capabilities are important to all of those functional communities. However, the civil engineers and managing built infrastructure is the primary target so far, but the other communities are quickly realizing that they have interests and needs. And as a portfolio manager, I'm working with all of those communities to make sure that we, use slogans like buy once, share many. Let's not buy things more than one time. The installation is the installation, so we don't need to map it multiple times. Let one entity map it once, share it with all the others, and then as you begin to layer on the information from the other functional communities, they can share, and that results in shared situational awareness across the entire mission support spectrum. So that's a little bit of a backdrop, and I've been here coming up on 2 years, and I moved here from Air Mobility Command there at Scott Air Force Base in Southern Illinois.
Well, while I've got you talking about Southern Illinois and Scott Air Force Base, that's a great transition. Thank you. How significant are these operations here? I mean, you've clearly been doing work around the country and around the world, Richard. How significant, is the work of US Transcom, AMC, and SDDC? It's a lot of acronyms there, located at Scott.
Yeah, I made a couple notes leading up to today's call, and I spent the better part of 17 years around Air Mobility Command and US Transcom, and one of the sayings that I have seen and heard many times is if we, then Transcom and AMC, if we don't take you, you don't go. If we don't take you your supplies, you don't get them, kind of thing. So, Transcom is managing all of those logistics, the distribution of them, the management of the distribution. And so, as you can imagine, having that asset visibility and ability to know where something is, where something needs to be, when it's going to get there, what path it's going to take to get there. There's a lot of important requirements there from a geospatial perspective. And I would also offer up that with NGA, it's kind of important to note that NGA works a lot on the intelligence side, but the logistics side is more operations, execution, and sometimes it's even in what we call the business domain more than the intelligence domain. So they need to work hand in hand, but they are unique from each other.
Wow, what an incredible network that has to be stitched together on a daily basis, but specifically, overall with logistics. I could see where that would be an amazing asset. David, what are some of the most significant challenges you've seen with logistics around airports that are using these geospatial technologies? Think about Atlanta, Hartsfield, you mentioned the Skipple. I've spent time in both of those quite regularly. What are some of these challenges, especially, well, not now, but, in the future as we move to, again, a more robust and busy airport system?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. COVID this year has dramatically changed everything in the airport. So just as recent as January, just about all of the US airports were operating at or beyond capacity. Now, for example, I've spoken to airports like Atlanta. Atlanta typically processes over 100 million passengers a year. This year, they may get to 30 million. So it's a staggering reduction. And so what I'm seeing now is, airports having to learn to adapt. There's a lot of unpredictability in the way they operate. Their flight schedules are very unpredictable. Their passenger volumes are very unpredictable. They're all operating with fewer staff, but they all focus on 4 primary business priorities. And those are safety, health and security, customer service, operational efficiency, and financial performance. And so our technology is being used to support all of those priorities. So for instance, in terms of safety and security and health, we have lots of command centers that we equip at airports. So they have really incredible situational awareness, both outdoors and indoors, because, people quite often think of geospatial as outdoor maps. And now, that isn't the case. We map indoors just as much as we map outdoors with very intelligent maps. And so now with this situational awareness, airports are able to observe whether passengers are violating social distancing. They can do this real time because, we've now unified GIS with IoT. So using things like Wi-Fi, we're able to track in real time the movement of people through their mobile devices. It sounds a little scary, big brotherish. It's done anonymously, but you're able to sort of see patterns and then respond to, any situations that would cause concern. In terms of operational efficiency, we're able to consume data about the movement of aircraft, both in the air and on the ground. And then using AI and machine learning, very quickly match different types of aircraft and combination of aircraft so that they go to the most appropriate gate. Because you've got so many varieties of aircraft, and they won't all fit at every gate, and some of them won't fit at a gate when the aircraft next to them is a particular type. And so airports are moving from a fixed gate assignment model to a dynamic gate assignment model. In terms of other things like customer service, we're seeing the use of our technology in mobile applications that are being made available to passengers to inform them about the new passenger journey. Because COVID has introduced a lot of new dynamics that passengers aren't used to. And then finally, our tools are being used to help airports sort of drive their financial performance. So, one of the biggest revenue streams at an airport are the retail operations, the concessions, being devastated by COVID. But, using our analytics again, hopefully airports are going to be able to understand the flow of people, dwell time, and so on around some of those businesses and drive more business. So lots of interesting dynamics.
That is, phenomenal. I think about all the days and years I've spent in airports, specifically Atlanta, and on the runway, inside the terminal. And that is massive in terms of the efficiency and the passenger journey, and what a difference that'll make. That's amazing work. Byron, as a fellow startup founder and CEO, what resources have you felt are most important to you as you build your business right now in this space?
Yeah, thanks, Bronwyn. That's a great question. And, as a startup, as you well know, too, it's all about product and customers and getting great insights like David there, speaking to a lot of the, current needs in the industry with airports and airlines. So being able to access customers and get feedback, that's a big one. The product side resources for that, particularly when you're not coming from a geospatial background like myself. My background's in chemical engineering, and I promptly did very little of that when I got out of school and moved into other engineering disciplines. And I've kind of migrated across the whole spectrum from chemical to civil, mechanical, and now I'm primarily working with electrical engineers and embedded systems with our wireless sensors. And so, we know there's great opportunity, and, we've incorporated GPS tracking technology and some basic mapping right now in our product, but we know there's huge opportunities when you have someone like a railroad whose life is really driven by the quality of their rail track, their infrastructure, there's massive potential for bringing that geospatial, some of the latest technology there to that industry. And so being able to tap into, great resources here in St. Louis, such as through Geosaurus and T-Rex, meeting folks out of ESRI, others to kind of help us understand in our journey how we can develop some of that. So mentorship is a great help and great asset. And then lastly, your cash is your life as a startup, and no cash means no life, and you go down pretty quick. And so access to capital is obviously a big need and a big resource if you have that. And it's great to see local venture capital firms like Cultivation who are really investing in the space and have opened a geospatial technology fund to really kind of help support some of that innovation.
Oh, that's amazing and absolutely true. I agree with that 100% and live that life. And so as you think about those resources here and the ones that that are needed to propel you forward, and as you are out doing customer engagement and applying this technology with your customers, are you seeing, and I don't want to go too deep into the secret sauce here and what's going on, but are you seeing the traction that you'd like to see in terms of how people are actually applying your technology into into their operations?
Yeah, and we're still fairly early on too, so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But
exactly.
we've seen immense demand. It's really kind of been shocking how fast it's come. But I think that speaks, at least within the rail industry, and I think logistics and supply chain more broadly, the desire for real-time visibility. Everyone talks about the Amazon effect, right? And being able to see when your package is going to arrive, and usually they surprise you and bring it even sooner than what they project, and 2-day shipping, and very customer-friendly tools. But I mean, it goes back to FedEx in the 60s and 70s, first putting barcode scanners on packages and starting to create some of that. In the rail industry, we have a 30-year-old data infrastructure, essentially, and a very inflexible, poor way of tracking where rail cars are at. And so just simply the ability to see where's my rail car, where's my train, is a massive upside for rail shippers and for railroads who want to give that information to their customers, but are currently unable to. Mm-hmm. So yes, there's a big thirst for greater visibility and reliability in the supply chain. And I think that's only been accelerated with COVID, as the supply chains are reorienting themselves, and there's been massive disruption, from a variety of factors that's resulted in 2020. So the more that we as technology providers can provide in terms of visibility and reliability, I think there's going to be a long-term demand in that area.
It sure is. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to come back to you in a minute and talk to you a little bit more about St. Louis and the resources here to help move you forward. Richard, as I listened to David and as I listened to Byron talking about their experiences in the civilian commercial sector, given your experience in working with the Air Force as well as the DoD, when you think about these geospatial innovations, what's coming up as the most right now, the most common and compelling examples? You've shared a little bit around how they're used and what what they're for, but what are you seeing right now as like some of the most unique and new, I said common, but unique and new geospatial innovations that are being embraced?
Yeah, so I think this dovetails nicely with the previous comments. Supply chain risk management seems to be one of the leading Air Force logistics geospatial enablement activities today. I started working with supply chain folks out of Oklahoma City at Tinker Air Force Base probably close to 3 years ago, and now we've evolved to a point I'm working with a number of logistics entities, but the supply chain folks have really grabbed onto it, and it started with hurricanes, and then it went to wildfires, and then it went to counterfeit parts, and the evolution of supply chain risk management has been huge. In fact, the hurricane lead-in, if you think back to Hurricane Michael hitting the panhandle of Florida, I could tell a story, and I'll save it maybe for another time unless we have time later. But Hurricane Florence, I think it was approaching the East Coast, and then a couple weeks later, Hurricane Michael hit, and I was already working with supply chain folks. But it comes down to this: one of the scenarios is, where do we have a sole source provider of a weapon system component that is in the path of the hurricane? And there's two parts to this. The part they understood first was the crisis response, like, oh no, what are we going to do now? And then after the dust settled, they realized, wait, we could be running these scenarios in advance and start working with those suppliers ahead of time. So we either address their risk mitigation plan, and what do they have as plan B should a hurricane take out their only facility that produces the one and only component, or do we need to let 2 or 3 more contracts to other companies in other parts of the country so that we can swap out our supply chain vendor primary to someone else during such a crisis? So it became a crisis response turned into a deliberate planning, forecasting and risk avoidance in advance issue. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, I share a kindred experience with you as we flew during Hurricane Florence, specifically for some entities, both private and public sector, perhaps we'll say maybe military in a sense, but having to work with local law enforcement and military to actually get that data real time, the use of UAVs, and how all of that then starts to feed to a larger data network. And then the logistics of how you're moving things. If this dam breaks, that means an evacuation. And so how do you manage all these things that are happening real time in the midst of a disaster? So I think with disasters becoming a catastrophe, unfortunately becoming more commonplace for us, this is going to be a huge asset to how we move forward. That's so interesting that we've been both having to touch that.
And if I could just add on to what you said there, one of the key points that I think I would stress is, if we look at all the, our whole culture, or especially in the military, we get subdivided into functional areas, and you can even subdivide logistics into supply and transportation, et cetera. And what I'm trying to do is lead the charge on more focused, not on the technical solutions, but rather the architecture that backs them up. Meaning, the federal government, we have a geospatial interoperability reference architecture. So my number one priority from my leadership is to establish a geospatial reference architecture, so that no matter who pursues geospatial solutions in the installations, mission support, logistics realm, that before they ever get started, they know what the rules of engagement are going in, so that all these independent stovepipe solutions can all share with one another when the need arises to share, because otherwise we get silos of information, and sometimes we reinvest in things we already have because they aren't interoperable from the outset. So I wanted to just highlight that the importance of that reference architecture.
Well, I want to come back to that. Please, I want to reference that in our next piece here with you. David, as you talked about airports and airlines, and of course, how devastating 2020 has been, and as we start to climb our way into 2021, you mentioned a couple of things around how airlines and airports are going to be using, this technology, this location-based technology, and everything from fleet management to retail. can you kind of share with us a little bit more specifically around how this works around fleet management specifically?
Yeah, so, you know, I sort of subscribe to the philosophy that you shouldn't waste a crisis. And so, you know, whilst, 2020 has been a really horrible year for everybody, for airports, they now find themselves, airports and airlines, they find themselves with perhaps an opportunity to do some things they haven't been able to do at other times because they were so busy. And so I'm advocating that they stand back and take a more strategic look at how they're using GIS. And certainly there are lots of opportunities to exploit location-based technologies in terms of what I call airport operations, which also involves airlines. And really that evolves around consuming real-time data. Because, in technology, when people talk about big data, they sometimes talk about data lakes. And I always think, the airport environment is like they've got data oceans. They've got so much data, but they very rarely make full use of it. It's so difficult for them to consume it and use it in a sort of smart way to enable them to be more proactive and use predictive analytics to help drive the way they operate. We have the tools to help them do that, but it really requires them to sort of press the pause button on some of the more tactical things they're doing on a daily basis and look at the strategic opportunities a bit more carefully and put in place some of the infrastructure they need in order to take advantage of those things. There are some tactical things we're doing as well. So, as I mentioned earlier, one of the big priorities at airports, as you can imagine, is safety. And so the airports have to perform things like daily inspections of the airfield to ensure the airfield is safe. And for a lot of airports, that has remained, a paper-based process, maybe a really crude IT-based, spreadsheet approach. Well, now we're equipping airports with mobile apps that allow airfield inspectors to do their job more effectively real time. So they drive around the airfield in a truck with easy to use applications that allow them to consume data about safety discrepancies on the airfield very quickly, report them back to the operations center, and then the operations center can dispatch other personnel to go address those things. So that may seem trivial, but what it's doing is it's really contributing to the overall performance of the airport and minimizing the number of times they have to shut down a runway because there's some debris on the runway. It allows them to sort of schedule essential maintenance at times when they have least impact on aircraft operations. So it's things like that. And then in sort of, that's on the air side. On the land side, again, just using location intelligence to make the customer experience more pleasant. And so one of the things I see coming out of COVID is maybe the ability for passengers to pre-order things like food and beverages that get delivered to them at the gate. And these things are being monitored both by the airport and the retailers, so they understand where you are and when they can deliver these sort of conveniences to you at the gate. And it will just streamline the whole passenger journey again, using location technology as a way to sort of provide visibility of where people are in a real-time context. Those are some of the things I see happening.
Yeah, that will be a huge asset and help organizations in the both in aircraft maintenance as well and management, as well as airports, get back on their feet for 2021 and help the passenger feel safer, more secure, and give them what they need in a more safe environment, because it's like we're going to be in this situation for a while.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's amazing how AI is impacting all of this, location-based tools and artificial intelligence. And Byron, in your work in the railroad industry, and you think about AI, I mean, you've recently been, I mean, obviously your technology and what you bring to the market is pretty fascinating. You actually, congratulations, are a recent Arch Grants Award winner. So congratulations for that.
Thank you.
So how will something like Arch Grants, we talked about resources earlier, help enable you to further advance your AI and your GPS capabilities and even be better positioned as you go to customers?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, the two big things, at least for an early stage startup, is it's all customer and products. And so being able to engage with customers and receive feedback on the product, that's everything right now. And so we've been doing this. Hum was founded in 2019 here in St. Louis, and we've been talking with folks in the freight space in St. Louis since then. And I think this is just going to help through Arch Grants extend our reach. It's kind of, Arch Grants, I guess, a little bit like the debutante ball, where we can finally come out and get more involved in the St. Louis business community. As we seek to help grow St. Louis through building our company, we hope to engage with anyone who's shipping freight, really. So lots of enterprises here, lots of potential customers for us, but getting their feedback and solving a lot of the things like David mentioned that airports are looking at, just trying to bring to bear some of these tools in these applications that haven't realized the potential of more visible data, automated processes, trying to make it safer for folks with boots on the ground, all those involved. And so that's what we look forward to doing here over the coming months and years, is really kind of engage and help grow the St. Louis freight network too.
So would your clients be, I mean, not only I'm looking at, because I wrote them down, but like the CSXs and the BNSFs, but also the FedExes, as well as the Evergreens and the Maersks. Would all of those folks be in your universe of potential customers?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, and our mission really is to integrate the supply chain, to have more accessible information sharing, more standardized processes, so that when you have someone like, say, an Emerson here in town, or a big grain company like where I came from, working on the ag and food side, they don't just ship by rail, they don't just ship by truck. They have varied needs in their supply chain, and if transportation and logistics companies can better integrate themselves into that, that can better anticipate their needs, it's a lot smoother, more efficient process, overall. So we serve, starting with the freight rail industry, we serve everyone, car owners, shippers, and railroads.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, Richard, for you, probably someone like Byron and someone like myself will be knocking on your door as startup founders in this space. So from a federal government and DoD perspective, how do you engage with industry and early stage startups like ours? And, and how can we work with, the government? What's the best path? Richard?
Sorry. Can you hear me? Mute button challenges, too many mute buttons. That's a great question, and I'm not sure that I have the best answers available, but there's a couple things. There's a website called FedBizOps for federal business opportunities. If you're not familiar, you might want to watch that, and I think there's ways to set up alerts for certain keywords. The other one, if you haven't heard, I'm interested to know if anyone has or hasn't heard perhaps of the SBIR, SBIR, the Small Business Investment Research, so sbir.gov. I've seen a lot of that lately, and I don't know if we'll discuss it more later, but I have some thoughts and feedback on the SBIR initiative. I consider myself very much an innovator, and yet at the same time, I'm challenging the innovations that I'm seeing, because it's not the technology that ends up being the hard part, it's the culture, especially in the DoD or the Air Force. there's books out there about, culture will eat technology for lunch kind of things, and change the culture, change the game. I've spent 20 years doing this, and I started out as a young officer in the Air Force, and it was a lot of, well, why can't we do this? Can't we do this? Look, we could do this much better. And it's not the technology that ends up becoming the challenge. You can buy the technology or have it developed all day long, but if the culture isn't going to adopt it and use it, then you're just kind of throwing money down the drain. So I would always, I always challenge my technologist teammates to contemplate their existence beyond the technology. That again, the culture can just be a huge hurdle, especially in the DoD, or it's the way we've always done things around here kind of mentality. Well, we don't have to do it that way. They get comfortable. And then for whatever it's worth, if we're talking geospatial here, I was the lead in establishing an Air Force Geospatial Support Services IDIQ contract. It's indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. So it's kind of like a master contract. There are 5 companies that have already won that contract, being a 5-year overarching contract. But I don't know, perhaps trying to do a late partnership with some of those companies might be another avenue for such pursuits.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, you mentioned SBIR, and there's STTR. I know the Missouri SBDC just had a big event 2 weeks ago with all of the government agencies talking about the programs and to get ready to, apply for phase 1, or if you're phase 2. So thank you for that. We'll make sure that we share that in the notes out after this, the Fed BizOps as well as the ADIQ potential relationship. So thank you for that. And then David, I'm going to also throw that same question at you. This is St. Louis Startup Week. So what startups do you work with in the transportation industry? And maybe not the exact ones, but how can startups get engaged with Esri? And what are you looking for?
Yes, so Esri actually has a startup program. It's a 3-year program to help early stage startups build mapping and location intelligence into their products and businesses. The program provides access to Esri's software, development tools, ready to use content, training support, and lots of co-marketing opportunities. So if you're a startup looking to build on the Esri technology platform, I've just put in the chat window the link that people can go to on the Esri website. In terms of startups that I work with, actually, and this may relate to you and Byron, one company I've really enjoyed working with over the last year is a company called Airspace Link. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with them. Okay, so very innovative company. They've been working with the FAA and local communities to allow local communities to map out the new drone highways in the sky. And at the other part of their solution, it allows drone operators to submit flight plans and get them approved really quickly. And this has really taken off, and they're working with a lot of state governments, a lot of local governments. A lot of kudos from the FAA, because, with all the concerns about it, environment and this, the sort of Amazon delivery type world we live in now,
right.
Moving more of that traffic to the sky and making that a viable option is really something I think it's going to attract a lot of attention. So Airspace Link, they were an Esri startup, and in very short order, they've established themselves as leader in a new market that they're defining. So it's really exciting to work with them. And the overlap with me is a lot of the airports are seeing airports as a sort of a pickup and takeoff spot for freight. So you could get freight that's being transported across the country via traditional air carriers, And then the local distribution is taken over by these drone operations. So they get it from the airport to the local neighborhoods. That model is one I see evolving. It's evolving really quickly. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting as we look at integration into the national airspace, to your point, with delivery and including things like UTM, unmanned traffic management,
Yep.
ADSB, DAA, detect and avoid systems. And so there's a lot of, bigger companies and startups kind of working on figuring out that map for the sky and that whole safety matrix with the FAA. And how are all these things working together and integrating, both from a delivery perspective, people like me in the inspection and mapping business, and these drone ports and then urban air mobility. It'll be interesting to see how all of this comes together for all of us. So, wow, I want to go deeper into artificial intelligence with each of you guys, but this would be a 9-hour webinar. So with that, I want to start to open up the floor. Let's see if we have any questions that have come in the chat, and then we can start opening up. Okay, there's some excitement here. Let me just kind of scroll back up to the top. Let's see. Okay. Sorry, let's just open it up to questions, because there's quite a bit here. I'm just going to make sure we get some good questions in here. Jonathan, if you could just open it up for any live questions.
Hi guys. The Q&A is open, and I was trying to text a question in the chat, and apologies for any weirdness with the chat. It's the internet and we've got flamers, and I'm really sorry about that. I've been doing my best. Anyway, let me ask you guys a question. This is a great panel. Bronwyn, you just mentioned there's kind of land and air and mapping and things like that. I was wondering, what are the kind of geospatial planes that, people getting into the ecosystem should think about? Should they choose like land plus air, or just focus on sea or air? Or do you see what I mean? Like specific geographies that start up.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big one. It's got to be, where do you have a love for it? What do you have a love for in this space? And actually, I'm going to actually toss that one over to Byron, because he's kind of, his work is crossing kind of multiple geographies and capabilities. Byron, what do you think about that question?
Yeah, and if there's that famous Amazon patent out there too, right, where they're deploying drones out of containers flying off of rail cars. So yeah, we might have the whole kit and caboodle if that whenever it comes to comes to life. The railroads say no, that's never going to happen, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think the important thing is, like you said, go where you're passionate about. For me, I had never intended to start this business. I only started this business because it wouldn't leave me alone. And I saw some massive opportunities to bring the latest technology in IoT and AI, geospatial, blockchain, distributed ledger technology, to bring all those to bear in a very old industry that really wanted to change, and to help make it safer and more efficient for just an easier job for everyone involved. So yeah, that's the best advice I can say is find that passion, find a place you can dig the shovel in and make a difference, and then go after it. Start a business. Best thing I've ever done.
Yeah, and you've got to do your homework in the marketplace. Where's the biggest demand? Where's the biggest need? And are you creating a solution that matters? Is this solving someone's problem uniquely? But it's got to be, do you love it? And do you really want to do that? And we talk a lot about St. Louis, being this new destination for geospatial. I want to just stay on that for a second, because this is now a very particularly magical place right now. Richard, now that you're in St. Louis and you've been looking at things from a global perspective, what are the thoughts right now about St. Louis's emergence in this geospatial space in your sector?
Yeah, so as I said, I spent the better part of 17 years up there before coming here to San Antonio, and how I even found out about all of this was from Matt Hanks, and I don't know how many of you all have met Matt Hanks, but Matt is at Air Mobility Command now. He took over the position that I vacated there. I've known Matt for a number of years, and he's been very excited about the whole effort there and what's really come of it. I think that there is a huge opportunity for St. Louis, and having lived there for 17 years and become almost became a hometown for me. Go Cardinals! It's exciting to see something like the innovation centers take root there. There's just I think the city is starving for such a capability, and sitting now in San Antonio. And then making plenty of trips to other areas, including Washington, D.C. I'm excited for the St. Louis area. I think this is a good thing. And knowing that NGA is there and they're getting their new facility constructed, and you've got U.S. Transcom and Air Mobility Command just a short 15 to 20-minute drive away, there is so much geospatial opportunity there that I think it's a wise choice. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot happening here, a lot. And I think we're just at the beginning. And I'll ask the same question of you too, as well. David, what are your thoughts right now about all, I mean, you guys have a solid presence here. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, we've got an office in St. Louis. It's a sort of regional center for us. And actually, our founder and president recently had an article printed in one of your business magazines that set out his vision and thoughts about geospatial technology and how St. Louis could play an important role in that. One of the things that I would mention is, and I'm always fascinated by people that can put sort of different needs together and come up with a solution. And this is an example of something that crossed all of our transportation sectors. And so just about all of the sectors, whether it's highways, airports, or transit or rail, there's this need for people to inspect the condition of road surfaces, of rails, and traditionally that's been a very long, laborious process, very expensive. And what I've seen are, people pulling together different types of geospatial capabilities using drones, artificial intelligence, and machine learning now. And so recently, working with an airport, they were able to complete an entire runway pavement inspection process in a matter of days using high definition imagery captured from a drone, and then using machine learning and AI to do image recognition so they could classify the different types of damage on that runway. Probably saved hundreds of thousands of dollars, a massive amount of time, and delivered really great results. But it took someone with that sort of unique perspective about how to transform a very old process into a new dynamic process using these tools that we now have at our disposal. And I think there are lots of other examples out there. If people can zero in on them and pull together solutions, I think there's a really amazing market. And I think St. Louis, if you become a center of excellence, where you have resources that are highly trained, I think there's going to be huge demand for geospatial technology skills. And kudos to St. Louis for, creating an environment where skills like that can thrive.
Well, I thank you for that. And I think I see a couple of questions here that kind of dovetail into that. And one is, are the bulk of federal opportunities, Richard, this might be one that you can answer to a bit. are the bulk of federal opportunities found with the NGA, or are there other agencies hiring geospatial service providers? And I can't speak to the agency perspective, but I know in the private sector, there's certainly that need for that geospatial talent is about to, there's going to be a swell for that need to take place, artificial intelligence and everything else, data scientists, engineers, web design, software engineering. But Richard, what are your thoughts on other agencies outside of the NGA, since you are working with obviously other federal entities?
Yeah, so I tried to post an answer for Michael there in the chat window if everyone can see it. But the gist of it is, and after spending 17 years there, I felt like I was constantly competing with NGA for talent. We would bring people to town to Air Mobility Command, and before long, they would see an opportunity at NGA and they'd leave and go work with NGA, either as a government employee or as a contractor. But I would say you're right, there is a huge emergence of need out there. When you have people using their smartphones in their personal life to find the Applebee's and what's on the menu and how to get there and when do they open and when do they close, you know, that changed the culture, the society that we live in. And so now everyone I come across so many people go, we could do this and we could do this and we could do this. And the irony is like 20 years ago as a youngster, I thought we could do this and we could do this, and people didn't get it. And then Google Maps and whatnot set in, and here we go. What I would offer up is NGA is in the intelligence world. They do a lot of secret security, classified work, and above top secret, etc. And that comes at a high dollar cost to the government and to the providers as well. The world that I live in is more in it's almost, we call it business, right? It's more the business domain than the warfighter domain. And so there's a lot of opportunity there that is not in the classified realm. It's probably easier to get to, it's easier to support. It may not have the same profit margins, but it is still an emerging arena where there's a lot of demand.
Absolutely. And here, here's a question for everyone on the panel, both Byron and David and Rich, from Mark here with the T-Rex Geospatial Innovation Center. As we continue to grow the St. Louis geospatial ecosystem, what can we do to assist you in your growth as a startup, advance your business as a large industry partner, or modernize your mission as a government agency? So what can St. Louis be doing to make this an easier space to grow? Byron, you want to go first?
Well, yeah, sure. I think Rich mentioned that culture is such a huge part of driving adoption, and especially when you're working with enterprises, that's a big part of it. I think probably one of the easiest, the most overlooked things that can be done is just the education aspect, educating potential customers, industry experts, creating the conversation to help them see the possibility, and then also helping them understand the value, the return on any investment that it would take to adopt the technology, to help kind of overcome some of that inertia and to kind of get a little bit of excitement so that they can take on a big initiative that usually comes with adopting and integrating new technology. That's a large part of our work and educating our customers and our industry and the work that we do. And once they understand, they're on board. But it takes a little bit to kind of answer all those questions and to help see what the value really is.
Thank you so much, David.
Okay, in the airport space, I think something that's worth note. So airports really have embraced GIS, but typically they have very few resources to manage the GIS environment. And so there are many GIS services contracts that are issued by airports. There's one at the moment that's been released by Denver. And what's sort of interesting about these, because the airports receive federal funding through the FAA, they're required to award these contracts to vendors that at least have a subcontractor that's a small or minority owned business. So I think if you're a startup and you're looking to break into the airport GIS space, you know, looking for these opportunities. All the airports regularly let these GIS services contracts. More than likely, they're going to let them to a prime that's an established, mature vendor, but that vendor will be looking for smaller subcontractors to supplement their team in order to comply with these federal procurement requirements. So I think there are a lot of opportunities out there for people that want to pursue this airport GIS market. Go
Thank you
check
so
out Denver.
much. Absolutely. And Rich, you've shared quite a bit, but is there anything that St. Louis could be doing, you know, to make this easier for you?
I'm not thinking of anything specific offhand, but what the AFIMSC, the organization that I work for, has an innovation director. He's a GS15 pay scale guy, and I mentioned this to him, and San Antonio is apparently looking to do something similar, not necessarily with geospatial, but they're doing something in concert with Geekdom and trying to establish an innovation complex like St. Louis. So he, once COVID breaks, I think he and I would like to make a trip up and see what you all are doing and see what we can learn from it and bring back to San Antonio. So I think there is a chance that there's some real leadership coming out of St. Louis. So that's super exciting.
Fantastic. I know there are a couple of people that would be happy to host you. Mark and Patty here at T-Rex probably would be first in line, but there's a whole host of people here to do that. Well, there's one last point that was brought up, and then we're going to close out. And Jonathan asked about London also becoming a leader in geospatial and saying, you know, is this a zero-sum game? And I would say, you know, as you kind of referenced, Jonathan, Silicon Valley with this kind of DNA for startups and the computer industry, but it's really all tech right now. I think the startup DNA, as a startup founder here in the geospatial space, it's growing. The blossom is happening right now. And so this is a good time to get started. It's young, it's fresh, and I think we're going to see more of it, especially as the NGA, as we've mentioned earlier, starts to open up and grow. The private sector starts to open up, the relationships with academia start to grow, and the need for talent. So I think that startup DNA is going to emerge, especially around geospatial, but all the things that support it. And as it relates to any other region in the world, you know, I don't think Silicon Valley has a patent on growing startups. So I think that any cooperation, I mean, I work with companies all over the world, hardware companies, software companies, and sometimes even talking to competitors around what they're doing and finding some similarities and opportunities. So I don't think that there's no one's trying to shut anybody else out. I think there's always an opportunity for cooperation with people who are, you know, thinking about growing this geospatial sector. So bring it on. Well, anyway, I want to thank everybody for joining us today for this fantastic panel. I want to thank David and Byron and Rich for being a part of this. And stay tuned for more Startup St. Louis Week events. I'm Bronwyn Morgan. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bronwyn.